Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning, and it is International Women's Day 2024. So happy International Women's Day, everybody. I I like today. I like today. There's a lot of hype around it. And some people rightly get upset about that. But I want to take this opportunity to not be upset about it, but be happy about it. Women have come such a long way in the world of work, and even in fairly recent history. So yesterday I joined a 80 strong choir in the city of London, and we listened to the stories of women who worked in the city, so in London Square Mile financial district. And we listened to stories of women old and new who'd always worked in the city. And it was just amazing. And singing with everybody and coming together. We did a suffragette song, March of the Women. It was great. And that kind of gave me a real stark reminder about what it was like for women in the city hundreds of years ago and what it's like for them today. We are by no means where we want to be. And I think all of us know that. We don't have gender pay parity. There's all kinds of parity that we just do not have as women at work. But today we celebrate. Today we encourage each other, and today we say we've come a long way and we're going further. And today I wanted to do a bit of a different episode in honor of International Women's Day. And last year for International Women's Day, me and a friend, Grace, who's going to be sharing her family story on the podcast today, hosted a dinner for women around International Women's Day. And we got a group of women who didn't know each other together. And we all sat and chatted and found out about one another as women do. And we had a really lovely time. And there were some question prompts on the table for us to kind of get conversation going. We didn't need them in the end, but there was one question prompt that really got everybody thinking and really got everybody talking, and it promoted some really interesting conversation. And I haven't forgotten it. So I wanted to pull that question prompt out again this International Women's Day and ask more people to tell me the story and answer the question that I posed. So that story was me asking people, or that question, should I say, was me asking people about what their grandmothers did for work and whether those grandmothers could have dreamed of doing what it is that the people sharing their stories today do now. So, what did your grandmother do for work? And could she have dreamed of doing what you do now? And I think only for one of the people who shared their story with us, and there's a few, the answer to that was yes. And for a lot of them, I think the answer was no. And it just is a real tangible way of seeing how far in 2 generations, just 2 generations, we've come along from where our grandmothers were. So that's why this episode's called Grandma and Me, Career Stories from the Women Who Came Before Us. And I'm going to share the stories. I shared this on Instagram and I shared this on LinkedIn, and people kindly shared their stories of their career and their grandma's career with me. And I am going to share them with you. So happy International Women's Day. I hope you're celebrating yourself and the women around you. And I hope you'll celebrate these women with me. So the first one that I'm going to share with you is Grace Williams. And Grace is the founder of Loom. She's a program director in the Park Royal Design District in London. And she says, my grandmother was a nurse, but I think she gave up when she had 4 children, like most women did in the 50s and 60s. Then she helped my granddad to run his sweet shop. I don't think she would have even imagined that the job I do could have even existed. So Grace founded her own brand, her own agency, her own thing, Loom, and now she runs that, manages other people, and is responsible for art and regeneration through art and artistry in an entire district of London. And obviously, slightly different from what her grandma did. The next person that shared their story was Anya. And Anya is a partner at Brown Jacobson law firm, and she specializes in public procurement, complex project, and commercial and governance advice. And I asked What did your grandmother do? And could she have imagined doing what you do? And Anya said, yes, she could, because she did what I do. Anya's grandmother, who was called Margaret Anderson, was one of the first female lawyers in Scotland. And Anya says she had to be sponsored by her father to ensure that she was okay to become one of the first female lawyers in Scotland. And Anya said, and then she married and had kids, and that was that, with a sad face. And I know that Anya has a kid. And so, unlike her grandmother, who presumably, maybe she wanted to, but maybe she had to give up her job that presumably she'd fought pretty hard for, because if she was one of the first female lawyers in Scotland, I'm guessing it was unusual, and I'm guessing that she had lots of barriers and challenges to overcome on the way to that. And then she married and had kids, and that was that. But for Anya, who is also a lawyer and a partner in her law firm and does loads of really good work around equality, diversity, and inclusion, she's carrying on that mantle from her ancestors, from her grandmother, Margaret Anderson. And she hasn't quit her job. Now she has a kid. I actually don't know whether she's married, but I know she has a partner, and she does have a kid, and she carried on. So in 2 generations, the same, kind of the same story, but a slightly different endpoint, which is great to hear. The next story we have is from Sangeeta Bodalia, and Sangeeta is head of legal early notification team at NHS Resolution, and that's the organisation that I used to work for before I ran the business full time. And NHS Resolution is an NHS organisation who deal with all of the claims that might get brought against hospitals, against GPs, and they handle and manage all of those claims and pay them, etc. So Sangeeta is head of one of the teams over at NHS Resolution, and she shared the story about her paternal grandma. So she said she raised 7 children in Africa up to age 18, with my father being the eldest. When they were expelled by Idi Amin, they moved to the UK, and my father and mum supported his parents. She says, I don't think my paternal grandma ever worked in employment. My maternal nanny, with an I, raised 3 children and relied on her brothers to help provide a stable household for them, as their husband couldn't provide a steady income. Sangeeta says, I don't think she ever worked externally either. Externally, as in they obviously worked hard internally, like in their households. She says, my parents, on the other hand, worked really hard, moving from various factories, working to self-sufficient business owners in later life. They never would have imagined earlier in their childhood the type of work that each of their kids and their spouses do now. All professionals with degrees and stable careers. And that's not a long time, right? In 2 generations, gone from a position of grandma's not working at all outside of the house, obviously working very hard within it, to manual work and life in factories, to creating them being business owners, and now all their children, including Sangeeta, she's a lawyer, are professionals. You see how far people come in just 2 generations. So thank you, Sangeeta, for sharing your story of your grandmas and your parents with us. The next story is from Maria Waterfield, and Maria is a diversity and inclusion lead. And she tells us that her maternal grandmother had 9 children, and I think it was her father, and her maternal grandmother died before. I think her father was 1. She says they all lived in a 2-bedroom flat in a Glasgow tenement. She had no washing machine or anything resembling mod cons, and therefore no time to hold down a paid job. When my mother had my brother, my gran looked after him so my mum could work in a sewing machine factory. At 16, this is Maria, when I got my O-levels, there was no discussion of me going to university. I was told I should think about getting a wee cleaning job locally. Fortunately, says Maria, I had some awesome male teachers who saw a little more potential. And now Maria works in a national law firm as a diversity and inclusion lead. And I can see from her profile that she was a finalist in the JLP DE&I Awards in 2021. So, Maria, thank you for sharing your family story and your story with us. So, I want to tell the story of my grandmas too and include them here. So, my maternal grandmother, who I called my Nan, always kept us regaled with hilarious stories. And I love to think that a bit of her lives on in me because some of our personalities can sometimes be a bit the same. And she was smart at school, always got straight A's. But I don't know that there was any way that she would or could have gone to university. I know that she took various jobs after school, administration type jobs. I know she worked in the office in a brewery, and I know she was working there when she met my granddad. And I remember her telling us that granddad expected her to give up work when she got married, like most women did in those days, just as a matter of course. Even if they worked, they might tend to give up work. Now, not everyone did, but she did. And she always told us that later, after she'd had her children, she was just determined to go back to work. And she did. And she took various jobs. One of them I remember her telling us about was she went to the local cinema and got a job, and she used to sell the snacks and the drinks before everybody went in and into the intermission. And she said that granddad wasn't very happy about this. And he expected to have his tea on the table when he walked in, and she was off working and, doing what she wanted to do to have an income for herself. And I just always loved those stories that she used to tell us about what was expected and what was the social norm for her and what she thought about that. And she didn't think a lot of it, I think, a lot of the time. And she went against the grain in quite a few ways. And I was really proud of her when she used to tell me those stories, even when I was little. I was really proud of her. And I think partly maybe some of my like feminist leanings, I don't know if they were just always in there or whether they were partly shaped and informed by my nan and those stories in the early days that she told us about her work life and what happened after school and what she would have wanted to do. And I don't know, do you know, I actually don't know. I should ask my mum this, what it was that my nan would have loved to have done. She was extremely capable and bright. And I wonder now if my nan, if Doreen had been alive in my generation, I wonder what she would have done. And I'm guessing she probably would have had more opportunities, more access, and I'm sure she would have done something more than she got to do because I don't think it was her dream by any means what she did. And my other grandma, so my paternal grandma, Alice, her name was Alice Green. She left school when she left school and she didn't go on for higher or further education, but she ended up working in. So I'm from Sheffield, and if you have ever picked up a piece of really good cutlery, you'll see that it has Sheffield is usually the name on the cutlery. And Sheffield is where stainless steel was invented. And so there was loads of cutlery, there was loads of silver. That's what people did. There was skilled trades in Sheffield. And my grandma, after she finished school, went to work in a factory. And her job in the factory, her part of the process was around making the cutlery, very traditional in Sheffield, but her job was to line the boxes that the cutlery was presented in. And if you've ever seen how this cutlery is presented, your grandparents probably had it as a wedding gift, right? It was in beautifully like lined trays with a whole dinner set of cutlery. And I recently went vintage shopping with my dad, and we went to some of the old vintage shops in Sheffield, and we got some cutlery. None of them from my grandma's factory, but one of them from my granddad's factory. And she worked doing that. I think she had, I can't remember whether it was 8 or 9 children. My dad's got a lot of brothers and sisters. And during that time when she was raising her family, I don't think she did work. But I wonder what my grandma would have done had she have had the opportunities that I've had. She, again, like my nan, was bright and extremely capable. And I don't know whether she enjoyed her job or not, actually, because I never asked her about it. But I doubt that it was her dream in terms of a job. I don't know if she had a dream in terms of a job or what it was that she would have loved to have done if she had have had the opportunity. But I wonder if you'd have asked my nan and my grandma, would they have been able to imagine doing the job that I do now? I don't know if either of them would have said yes. So I've gone from being a lawyer, a solicitor, to working in policy and strategy with government and with healthcare, and then to owning and running my own business as a coach and a trainer around confidence. Now, I guess they just would have looked at me, gone out, as we would say in Sheffield. I don't think that would have been a thing that would have been in their mind or a dream, but I wonder what on earth they would have done if they'd have had the opportunities that I had. And I wonder the same for you. But here we go on with the stories. So, this one is from Hannah Cantrell. And Hannah is a community engaged learning coordinator at Nottingham Trent University. And she does some amazing work there. And she says, my maternal grandma, Margaret Jarvis, worked in a hosiery and knitwear factory for most of her life. And her paternal grandma, Maria Cantrell, worked in a munitions factory in Strathclyde during the war before moving to England and working as a hospital orderly in what was then the Nottingham General Hospital. She says, my maternal grandmother died when I was very young, but my dad's mum loved to tell everyone about her granddaughters who had travelled and or gone to university and worked in an office as managers, right? So she thought that was unbelievable. And I wonder what Hannah's other grandma would have thought had she been around to tell her. I wonder if that was their dream, if they got their dream, or whether they would have done something completely different had they had the opportunities that Hannah's had to shape her career and end up doing what she does with communities and in the university and in academia. The next story is from a lovely friend of mine, Kat. And Kat says, I don't know much about my dad's mum, but my mum's mum worked in a pub with a family on and off. I very much doubt she would have even thought to stay in education, move city, and pursue a career. And she says, do you know what? You've made me think about this, and I'm actually going to talk to my mum and dad about their mothers and about what they did with their careers and about what dreams they had. So I know, because I know my friend Kat's life, that she stayed on at school, got higher education. She went to university. She got a good degree and she's pursued a career. She supports young people. And whether that's in a probation setting where the young people might be struggling or at risk in terms of the justice sector, whether they might be involved or referred from the police. And Kat's always done that kind of work. She's carved her own career and she's carved her own work in that area, and it's a career that she's committed to and that she absolutely loves. And I wonder whether that actually ran in her family and what her grandmothers would have done if they'd have had the chances that she had. So, some food for thought, right? I wonder if you've had conversations with your mom or with your dad, if you know them, about what your grandmother did for work and whether you think she could have even imagined what it is that you do now. Because I don't think mine could. And the last story that I'm going to share with you comes from Sally Cheshire, CBE. And Sally is the chair at CAFCAS, which is the Children and Family Court Advisory and Support Service. And Sally says, I feel proud of both my grandmas who each blazed a trail in their own way and showed me how to be a strong female role model and give back to society. My maternal grandma, Mary Webster, became a primary school teacher, and she says, albeit in a school where my granddad was headmaster. Despite being a mum when the expectation was to give up work. My paternal grandma wanted to be a teacher too, but she was forced to work in the office of her family's button factory in Lancashire until she got married and gave up work. She was widowed early in her 50s and finally realised her dreams by going to night school to gain a teaching qualification and then returning to teach textiles, pottery, and fine art in the same school. And Sally says, sadly, the creative gene has passed me by. So her paternal grandma was called Edith Mintoft. And she says, I think we live in a different era now, where in some countries at least, education can give women those life chances. She says, I've always worked hard and I've been fortunate to have done things I'm passionate about, like my mom, Sheila Mintoff. She retired from teaching music in a special needs school to go to work in adult education in a prison in her late 50s and had a support volunteer alongside her, Doris, who worked into her early 80s after a senior HR career at Boots. She says, and we'll end with this, let's celebrate all strong women on International Women's Day and hope that women across the world make progress too. Amen to that, Sally. And thank you for being a part of this podcast community. There are loads of you. And it doesn't go unnoticed that, this is part of the development that you do so that you can show up in your career and in your work and do the things that you want to do. That is essentially what I'm here to help people do. And I'm here to help everyone. And there's a special place in my heart for sure for the women. We have all different challenges in our workplaces and all different challenges in our work lives. And that's probably going to continue. And whilever that continues, I promise I will be here to strengthen, sustain, and support you in as much as I can and in all the ways that I can think of. And this podcast is one of them. So thank you for being a part of it. And I hope that it's caused you to reflect on your own family story if you know your family of origin, and if you don't. And I wonder what your grandma would have done if she'd have been alive as you are today and still in her career with your opportunities and the possibilities that you've got in your life. So think about that and maybe ask. This might sound a bit woo-woo for you, but maybe you can connect with, there's lots of cultures around the world that have a way of thinking about and connecting with their ancestors. And people listen to this podcast all over the world. So shout out to you guys if you do that. But actually in the UK, I don't think we necessarily do. But sometimes when I close my eyes and I think about something, I can see my nan there and I can know what she would say. So if you're doing things in your career, or if there's things you're not doing, or if you're doing things at work, or if there's things you're not doing, if you're hesitating, if you're wondering, maybe close your eyes for a second and just think about what it is your grandma, your nan, your nanny, however you called her, what advice do you think she would give you? What would she say? What encouragement would she have for you? What support would she give to you? What would she think about the opportunities that you've got? What would she be encouraging you to do? What would she encourage you to try? What dream that she might have had could you now fulfill 2 generations on? Happy International Women's Day 2024, everyone. See you in next week's episode. Bye.